Okay, so we could simply now double click here to copy that particular formula all the way down, and it will then basically do a lookup for each row. So what I want to do just before I continue is I'm going to go to the source data here, the lookup table. I'm going to cut this field over here, this column, employee code, and I'm going to insert it to the left hand side just for the rest of this exercise. Now, when I basically did that, you can see that it expanded the array to A to F, right? So it was, remember, it was B to F. So when I actually cut and moved that column, it expanded it, but it still kept this as 5. So what happened that basically did was that cutting and moving of columns affected the way the lookup worked, because column 5 now is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's this last year's performance grade instead of 6. So just be aware that if you do move columns around in the lookup array, you're going to affect the values that actually get pulled through. So in this case, I now have to go and change that number, the column index number, to 6, and I then have to just really copy and paste that down. So double clicking it would copy it all the way. All right, now what I want to do, let's assume that I want to pull in the basic salary, right? So if I do the basic salary and I want to just simply copy this formula, what I should actually do in terms of copying this formula as a first step is I should actually make the column A, because remember, we're always going to want it to refer to column A. Even when I copy it into D, we're going to want to refer to column A. So the column A should have a $ before it. So I basically make, this is what is known as a mixed reference, because the A is basically an absolute reference, whereas this to the row is a relative reference, right? So when I copy that across, so say I click on this and I copy it across, you'll see that it actually also pulls in Western Cape. And the reason for that is copying and pasting it across also kept it at A2, right? And because we had a absolute reference for the lookup array, the table array, that stayed exactly the same, right? But the issue is it didn't know that I needed to change the 6, the column 6. So that part you'd have to normally do manually, right? So I'd have to go in here and say, okay, that's going to be column 1, 2, 3. It's the third column out of the whole lookup table. So I would need to change that to 3, right? And I would then basically copy and paste that down. So that's how you would do that particular part. So even though copying the formula across, it's copying that value as a fixed constant, the column index num in our example. Now you can imagine that if you were doing a lot of lookups of a lot of different tables, right? Let's assume I now wanted to do the last year's performance grade. So let's just say I copy that. Let's say I wanted that to be in here, and I'll just paste it over there. And let's assume that in this column, I also wanted to put in the years of employment. So I'm basically putting in all the information, but you'll notice that I'm obviously not doing it in exactly the same order, right? So what I want to show you is it would be great if there was a way where, when this lookup was done, right, for this number 3, if there was a formula that could look at this particular description in the heading and then go and find it here and say, oh, it's in number 3. So use a formula to calculate what this 3 is. That this should be column 3. Similarly, when that formula should be copied across, you should then look at this heading, last year's performance grade, go into this list here and say, okay, where is it sitting? It's actually sitting in column 5, and then automatically have a function that works out that it's in column 5. So that's what we're actually going to show you how to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this row into a blank sheet to show you this formula first. So the formula that we're basically going to deal with is a formula called the match formula, right? So I'm just going to expand that. So I'm going to show you. So what we'll do is in this particular thing, we'll say, okay, let's say which one we're looking for. Let's say we're looking for basic salary, right? So I'm going to copy and paste that here, the description of it. And I'll just paste it as values. The way the formula works, you say equals match, right? So match says, what do you want to look up? So we want to look up this one here, basic salary, right? Where do you want to look it up in? And then you basically go, we're going to look it up in that array. So those are the different, descriptions. And I'm going to press an F4 to make it an absolute reference. Then I'm going to put in a comma, right? And now it says, what do you want? We want an exact match, right? So basically, if you don't put in a 0 here, it'll then find the nearest match, either the one that's less than or greater than in terms of the alphabetical sorting in this particular instance. So for an exact match, we want to say 0, right? So look at what that does. That basically worked out that it's the third one. If I had typed in, for example, into this formula, if I typed in your region, right, you can see it changed it to number 6. So basically this match formula, right, can actually go and look at this headings over here and work it out. So this is going to be quite a good learning experience. You obviously must follow and do this yourself as well, so that you can think through and actually get the deeper learning of doing this. So let's look at how we would do it. So we already have in here, all right, the vlookup A to, that's going to stay the same. We know that the employee data is A to F. Now this 6 is what we basically want to find to get it returned via a function instead of manually typing it in. So let's look at how we do that. We're going to say we want to match. Now what do we want to match? Now what we basically want to match is that in this column that we're in, we want to go to the very first cell at the top. Okay, and that C1 is what we want to match. However, when we copy this formula down, we don't want it to go C2, C3, C4. We want the 1 to stay constant because 1 is where the actual value is. So what are we going to do is before that number 1, we're going to put in a $sign. So when I copy down here, it will stay C1. If I copy this to that particular field, it will be D1. But as I copy down here, it'll still stay D1. Right, so the 1 is to be constant because we're always going to be looking at the description in row 1, irrespective of where we copy it, right? Now I say comma, right? What is the lookup array? Now the lookup array is exactly here from our lookup table, but just the first row. Okay, and if I press F4, all right, to make it a constant, and then I said comma, and it says what do we want? We want an exact match, 0, right? I could double click it, and then I click on the closing brackets, right? And then so let's have a look at what's basically happened over here. So we're saying the lookup value is that, the lookup array is fine. This is looking actually fine, except that there's a 1 here for some reason. So let's delete that 1. And then that should be false. So you can see that as I click on each part of this formula, it'll show me. So from a VLOOKUP perspective, I can see that that's the lookup value, that's the table, and the column index number now is replaced by this particular match function instead of having a fixed value, right? So let's test it out. Oh well, it's telling me that there's an error with this formula. So let's have a look at what the issue is. Oh, it looks like that 1 got moved. You can see there when I clicked on it. So what we basically wanted to do is we wanted to match C1, right? Which was that cell over there, the region, right? So now if I hit enter, right, you can see it's still giving me exactly the same result. And I can now copy and paste that. Now, the beauty of this is before I'd have to work out which for years in employment and for the other and for last year's performance grade, what is the column number. But now I don't need to do that. I can simply copy this all the way across and I can just go all the way down. I use the shift, control and down key. And now if I click on paste, everything works out perfectly. It's immediately picking up the performance grade. So if I press F2, you can see it's looking at that cell, the matching, it's using the match formula to work out what column number to use for that part, for that third argument of the VLOOKUP function. And similarly, the years of employment is working the same. So think about that. I could type in one formula, and then even if I added in any other columns, I don't have to add them in the same manner. I don't have to change that third function to tell Excel which column number to look in. This is one formula that's basically typed in here, and we can copy it across all of these different columns, because every time the formula itself will go and look and say what is the name of this column that I'm in. Then it will go here and find out what number is that column. So for example, for this particular one here, years of employment, that match function would have went and worked out 1, 2, 3, 4 years of employment is in 4, and that portion there, that portion here, match, would have returned the value 4, and that would make the rest of the VLOOKUP function work. So take a few minutes to actually do that exercise yourself and think through it, but that's a very useful function to use in conjunction with a VLOOKUP formula.